This is the keynote address for the LGBTQ Awareness Month, and I think what we have set up here is going to be a fascinating dialogue and exchange between not just about LGBTQ issues, but what the interesting thing that emerged for me out of this configuration of speakers is a kind of contrast between working inside the system, inside the legal system and political system, and working outside. The difference between grassroots organizing and organizing within the established structures. And we'll do Q&A with everyone after the next set of speakers. So next I'm going to introduce Holly Heller-Stedt, did I say that right? Who's been my contact with Canvas for a Cause and Occupy San Diego. Actually, I'm pretty sure I saw Holly do a teach-in. One of the first times I went down to Occupy, she was doing a teach-in on street canvassing and door-to-door canvassing, and she had very, very dynamic and insightful techniques about getting information and giving information in the context of canvassing. So, and Holly has brought with her two of her colleagues, all of whom have been involved with Canvas for a Cause, which is a grassroots organizing group that predates Occupy, the Occupy movement, and they've been involved with Occupy here in San Diego, and they've visited other Occupies around the country, and they'll have some really salient insights to share about activism outside of the context of the political and legal structures.
So I'm actually Nemo, and Holly's my boss. I'll give her an introduction. Holly Heller-Stedt identifies as a queer anarcho-feminist with a love for the land. She has a strong background in sustainability and food justice, and has worked on these issues both locally and internationally. Holly is a San Diego State graduate and a Southern California native. She has worked as a campaign director, board member for the California Student Sustainability Coalition, environmental lobbyist, and community organizer. She's been active in the anti-capitalist movement for the past several years and is still heavily involved with Occupy San Diego.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Hey everyone. So like I said, my name is Holly. It's really nice to be here. Thank you so much, Michael, for inviting us. I'm really excited, so I'll just give a more brief intro to Canvas for a Cause. So Canvas for a Cause is a pretty, sorry that was so loud, I have a loud voice. It's a pretty new organization. It formed right around after Prop 8 passed as kind of a response to see, opposition, had people going out, they had negative media all over the place, and there wasn't really much response in terms of standing up and fighting back against that. I was a volunteer with the Prop 8 campaign, and part of the strategy was don't talk to people that aren't non-supporters. And Canvas for a Cause takes the exact opposite approach to that. We believe that we need to reach out to every community because if we're always talking to only supporters, then we're never going to build and grow acceptance and awareness and inclusion. So that's our focus, is we go out and we talk to the public on a day-to-day basis about LGBT rights issues, different human rights issues, and we do that through different places like malls and stores and places in the public, and actually engage with people the entire day that we're able to run, as all of our funds come from people who decide to fund us. And we actually do go out specifically to non-supportive neighborhoods to talk to them about gay rights. And just saying the word gay in places like that can be really powerful, and we're actually able to move 22% of people that we talk to that are non-supporters onto our side and voting with us on issues. So it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty cool model, and you'll hear some more about it later. Like Nemo said, I've been pretty active in sustainability movements before this, but I grew up in Riverside, California, so about an hour away from here, and it was a very interesting time. I definitely felt pretty isolated and didn't really feel like I had anywhere to turn to when I was trying to question myself about ideas of gender and sexuality and all these different things. And I kind of turned to the internet to take that place, since the people around me didn't seem to fill that void. And coming down here, growing up, I came down to San Diego to go to school here, to start working here, and working with Campus for a Cause has been one of the safest spaces I've ever worked at in my life. We constantly strive to educate ourselves before ever taking action on an issue. I know I've seen other times when people go in and say, oh, yay, mighty this, right? And then it's like they're gone and no one there actually benefited from it. So we really try to make sure that we know what we're getting into and what we're talking about before we take action on things. So in specific regards to activism, what's really cool about this grassroots organization is that it does, even though we do work in the political sphere sometimes, like we go out and support issues or different ideals like that, we have never worked on candidate-based issues. It's always about more ideological things and more changing consciousness. And it's been really cool to know that you can go out, and when you have a supportive group of people in a space where you can learn from each other and grow from each other, it becomes a lot easier to stand up against injustices and oppressions and attacks and different things like that that usually you wouldn't be able to do. So like I said, we do talk to non-supporters, and it's not like that's always the easiest thing ever. It's not like people are totally free and don't say negative comments. Although you'd be surprised how many people keep their opinions to themselves. So what's really cool is that this is an empowering space that allows people to see that previously where they may have felt that their voice isn't being heard, maybe they went and voted for Obama in the election and they were hoping for this huge change and they feel let down and they don't know what to do. Having these grassroots movements gives people the power in their own hands and the spaces to create and work on projects that actually affect them and the issues that they care about. So that's a nice segue into Occupy, I guess. So, you know, last year there were all these major uprisings in Northern Africa, and, you know, our television screens were like covered hearing about Egypt, hearing about Tunisia, hearing about Syria, hearing about all these different places and mass uprisings on a scale that we had never heard before, because not only was it in just one location, but it was spreading across an entire area of the globe. And when Occupy Wall Street first happened, you know, it's very interesting, the media blackout that happened around those events. Most people didn't even know it was going on and how many people were there until, you know, 700 people were arrested crossing the giant bridge in New York. And so when I first heard that Occupy San Diego was going to happen, it's pretty interesting. So I've worked in different activist circles. Like I said, I've been involved in food justice. I've been involved with the International Socialist Organization, different anarchist groups and collectives. And, you know, when it first came up, like, what happens now is, like, the way we organize is totally different, right? So social media plays a huge part in our lives, and it's been a huge impetus to starting up these mass revolutions, these mass uprisings, both abroad and here locally. And so when it first came up, I was kind of talking to some activist friends, and it's funny, activism, like, you're supposed to be really open to everything, but you kind of, like, judge people sometimes that you don't know, and, like, no one had known who the organizers were, and it's like, so that's both really exciting, because that means, oh, people that aren't traditionally involved are getting involved, but it's also like, oh, how many people are going to show up? And one of the things that was really cool is I remember, so Occupy San Diego started on October 7th of last year. That was the first, like, official day. There had been planning meetings working up to that, so the prior 2 weeks to October 7th, every single night people would meet up and start organizing and trying to figure out how they were going to actually pull this off, right? Like, have a camp, be able to have food, be able to have medical, be able to have these spaces. And with Campus for a Cause, we have this thing called a field committee, and what it is both people that we work with and people in the community who come together to talk about projects to work on. And obviously this is something that came up, and we voted, our board fully endorsed it, and so we're like, yes, we can get fully involved. We started going the week before October 7th and trying to make sure that there was a queer presence and, like, all sorts of different things. And what really made me know that it was going to be something big and really started to get me excited was when I was out canvassing, so out talking to the public in front of like a Target or like a Rouse or something. Usually, you know, you're the one telling people about things, you're the one informing them, and people would come up to me and after talking to them about the Fair Education Act or different issues, they would be like, hey, have you heard of this thing called Occupy San Diego? And I was like, yes. Okay, so this is good. This is like a true grassroots movement, right? Like people that would never usually be involved in things have heard of this, and it's like on the radar. And that's really exciting because one of the hardest things we face these days is the apathy, right? That's put in by our media, like, you know, our news is talking about whatever Jennifer Lopez did or something, and it's like, that's the news, right? So to have this sort of like, this keyword that's popping up in people's minds all across the country is something really spectacular, and has really set the framework and changed our national mindset about the possibility of mass uprisings in our country, which is really exciting and leads me to kind of something Michael was talking about, which is working outside of the system to affect change. So a big criticism of the Occupy movement has been, how come you don't have a clear set demand? How come, you know, you're not endorsing a candidate? Come on, put all of your energy and all of this into like something tangible, which really ignores the fact that a lot of people don't have any faith anymore in our political systems. And I mean, you look at how our country was founded, and it's like this huge like story of like revolution and like, yeah, we're not going to pay those taxes and like all these things, and then you realize that our Constitution was written to say that, you know, slaves weren't considered people, and people that didn't have land couldn't vote, and people that were women couldn't vote, and people who weren't a man or a woman couldn't vote. And it just starts to break down that we're institutionalized with these ideas about, you know, sexism and racism and heteronormativity, and basically saying that if you don't fit into this one box and if you don't have all these certain privileges, then you actually don't have a voice politically. So working in grassroots organizing outside of the system is a part of recognizing that, and recognizing that maybe it's not just the people that we put into place, but the thing that's there that's actually causing some of the issues. So Occupy has been really cool it's been a lot of interesting debates. You know, the whole idea of the 99% versus the 1% has made for very interesting conversation. There's lots of people from lots of different backgrounds coming into there, and part of that means that, yeah, there were some very homophobic people that came into Occupy. And Jersey will touch on it a little bit, and I'm about to toss it over to him, but we worked very hard to create a safe space and a queer presence here in Occupy San Diego, and it was really important because once you're able to do that, once you're able to stand up and like explain to people like, hey, you know, there's all these different oppressions, and if we're ignoring one and saying it's divisive and saying, yo, don't talk about that, we're all people, we're all here for the same reason. If we're ignoring the oppressions that have kept us down and kept us separated, then we're ignoring the tools that we can use to break those apart and show people why we're still oppressed. So it's been really exciting. Occupy San Diego just had its 6-month anniversary on April 7th. So it's kind of, yeah, it's pretty crazy, but it's really exciting. I'm still very actively involved with them, and it's been very amazing to see the progression of different people who have started out, you know, came to just see what was going on, and now are like so interested in more grassroots organizing and learning and unlearning all of the institutions of oppression that have been socialized into us since, you know, we were born. So it's really cool, and one of the greatest things that's come about is awakening people and letting them realize that a vote isn't all you have to do. There's so many more things you can do to change your life and change what's going on with our communities around us. So I'll just give a couple examples and then toss it over to Jersey. But one of the coolest things I was able to participate in is teach-ins. So free education, free quality education that people provide for each other, especially as a time we hear about how the CSU is considering freezing, letting people go into their schools. Tuition hikes continue to go up. Student protests at the tuition hikes aren't covered on mainstream news media, but draw in thousands of students, draw in thousands of riot cops. And teach-ins are a form of like fighting back and bringing into communities the stories that we expect to hear in our classrooms, that we expect to hear on our news media, but don't, and kind of bring that power back into the hands of people. And luckily, we were able to host several. One was a canvassing one. Another one was a gender identity teach-in, which we've been continuing to improve on. But considering that the first day we were there, we heard people say things about gays and Jesus, and really negative things, to be able, when we had the gender identity teach-in, it was at the end of November. So mind you, this had been a little over a month after Occupy started. We had several different speakers come in and share their experiences about being transgender, being drag, what that means, what their life experiences were. And I think it peaked at about 70 people, which was really awesome. And you know, this isn't in an organized space, it's just we put it out into the world, we let people know that this is happening and people decide to come from all over. And not a single negative comment was made the entire night. It was just people who were so interested in hearing about this thing that we hear about, but we don't really get to learn about, we don't get firsthand details about, and being able to bring that and just like being open and being in a safe space and confident, being able to people have a space where they're just like, I just want to understand. You know what I mean? That's really what this breaks down to, is people just want to understand each other. They want to understand how we got to where we are. And how we do that isn't always through, you know, bringing people into the voting booths. It's through face-to-face conversation, which is something we do every single day. And it's through organizing communities to support each other, to be able to know that, hey, maybe there's only a corner store in my neighborhood, but I know someone who knows how to grow food, and that's really cool. And I'll just bring up one more thing and then toss it over to Jersey. Another really cool thing about Occupy is just it's a platform and a model where people can come to vet ideas. And if people are interested, they can do it. And if people aren't, maybe it's not going to happen. But it's a space where people from all sorts of different organizations and all sorts of different walks of life come. And sometimes there may be ideological clashes, but at least it's a space for people to finally come together and not be like separated by their different spheres. And so that's the biggest part of Occupy to me, is reminding people that although we're separated by these different things that oppress us, if we can recognize them and unlearn them together and work together to overcome them, then we can have great victories. And yeah, and one of the biggest victories probably for Occupy has been just changing the national dialogue about income inequality, which 5 years ago, how many times would you have seen that on the news or in the New York press or anything like that? And completely just changing mindsets about what is, you know, normal, what should be, what the American dream is. And some of those things include having people switch from banks to credit unions, having people start community gardens, having people stand up for their neighbors whose homes are being foreclosed. Here in San Diego, just yesterday, there's a man named Raul Carranza who has muscular dystrophy, and he was approved by a judge to receive acute care from Medicaid, which is 24-hour care. And unfortunately, the state has decided not to go along with the judge's ruling and cut his hours to 11 hours. He requires constant oxygen, constant different things, but he's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. And yesterday, just a community of different activists who met him through Occupy sat in at the state building, the governor's office for state health, and demanded that he get his hours back. You know, this doesn't just affect him, it affects his nurses who are losing their jobs because the state doesn't want to provide this care. And, you know, this isn't an individual case, but this is happening to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people across the country. So really Occupy is just a space for us to raise our awareness and, you know, to affect change through power in numbers and the belief that together we are more effective than any one person. So that's really cool, and that's what I'm gonna say for now. I'm gonna introduce Jersey, but yeah, if thank you. And if any of you have any questions later, of course, we'll have the Q&A. And thank you for listening so much. And like I said, this is Jersey. Jersey Deutsch identifies as a trans, radical, anti-capitalist feminist. He graduated from Humboldt State University in 2008 with a degree in journalism and an emphasis in literature studies, media studies, and gender studies. He worked heavily as an organizer on the Prop 8 campaign and spent his college career grassroots organizing on women's issues with a group called CUN. When graduating college, he organized with women with special needs in Northern California, fighting in Sacramento against the budget cut for the altered able community. He moved to New York City and became a canvas director with the Human Rights Campaign, or HRC, which is the nation's largest LGBT civil rights group. After that, he moved back to California as a campaign director with both the HRC and Environment California. His friend and co-activist brought him to Canvas for a Cause, which is where we work today. And there he has used his skills and tools as an organizer until he became Canvas for a Cause's field director. He is currently a field director of multiple campaigns and strongly identifies as an occupier. And without further ado, Jersey.
Like Holly, I have a really loud voice, so I will try not to get too close to the microphone or lower my voice, one or the other. Cool, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Canvas for a Cause and why we got involved in Occupy, and why it's really important that queer people were occupying and being recognized for occupying. So first of all, Canvas for a Cause, Holly did explain a lot about us, but we are a grassroots nonprofit. We are totally small donor funded. We don't take any corporate or business money, right? So in my mind, that is the most democratic way to run an organization. We need money. We don't get any state money, so they can't tell us what to do. And we're small donor funded, so we don't have anyone giving us $50,000 that if we make a decision, they pull it and we're done. I think our biggest donor is about $173 a month, and that is huge for us. So we get to make the decisions with the community and with the public and what we want. Unlike a lot of gay rights groups across the country are amazing, but the one thing that really makes us stand out from other gay rights groups and LGBT activist groups, there's a few things. We talk to non-supporters, right? And we're able to move 22% of them onto our side. That's like our big standout. We also identify as a gay group that gives back. So we see that gay and queer and trans is part of everything. So we're not just specifically working on a specific campaign that only involves the gay community. We worked heavily on gay marriage once upon a time. Now it's at its stagnant point, but we still protest for it. Right now we're canvassing on something called the Fair Education Act. Does anybody know what that is? Hands, maybe? Fair Education Act? Cool. That's why we're here. Most people don't know. What it is, it's a bill that was passed last July, and it was signed, so it's already in place. What it is it means that high school curriculums will incorporate LGBT civil rights leaders. So what that means is that we were left out before. Yes, public schools did not teach about people like Harvey Milk or the Stonewall riots. Does anybody know who Bayard Rustin is? 2 people that work at CFAC and 2 other people. And it's not your fault. Nobody ever taught you. That's the whole point. Bayard Rustin was Martin Luther King Jr.'s right-hand man in the Black Civil Rights Movement. Bayard Rustin was openly gay, and as a result, he is kept out of the history curriculum. So a bill was passed to include people like Bayard Rustin in the history curriculum. But of course, you guys know all the anti-gay groups that repealed marriage equality. They are working heavily to repeal the Fair Education Act. So I'm going to start this with saying, if you see something that says Stop SB 48 or the Class Act, that is not something you want to put your name down on. Because a lot of the public doesn't know what it is, they are using messaging that might say something like, it's really offensive. Stop child molestation, repeal the Fair Education Act. Obviously, it has nothing to do with the Fair Education Act. So when you see those petitioners, we'll give you information, you call us, we show up, we hold big homophobe signs, and we make sure they don't get a single signature an entire day. In fact, we did it about a week and a half ago when we tracked down a petitioner. Shelby was there. In a 5 to 6 hour time period, the person got 1 signature. And keep in mind, these are people that get paid per signature, so they're out there like doing this job. So we really blew it for them. So that's a little bit of what we do. And talking to those non-supporters, and when I say we're a gay group that gives back, It's kind of like, I identify with people in San Diego as, has anybody heard of the Jewish Family Services? They're huge, they're awesome, they do amazing things. Not everybody who works there is Jewish, right? They don't just give things to Jewish or social workers, to Jewish people in need, right? It's the same thing at Canvas for a Cause. We are definitely queer-centered, and our first and foremost is creating a queer safe space for queer people. So we're not gonna bring somebody into our space that, yeah, people that need education, absolutely, but somebody that's going to be offensive, the person that we're going to put first is the queer person to be protected. In our little bubble in Hillcrest, that is an old Mormon church that is now a gay rights activist. Cool, so a little bit about, I'm really short too, Occupy San Diego and why we got involved. I have some really crazy notes, so I'm sorry if things get confusing. So we do certain things to work within the system, right? We do huge get out the vote efforts. Like Holly was saying, we don't work for candidates, but the Fair Education Act, if the opposition collects enough signatures, they might not get it in 2012, but then they're definitely going to try again in 2014. We will do a huge decline to sign and get out the vote effort to vote in support of the Fair Education Act, right? That's a way that we work within the system. However, we don't work for candidates, like Holly said, and we're also, I talk about this all the time, and I'm sorry for people that have to rehear it, like the two of you. I'm like totally obsessed with the Black Panthers. So the Black Panthers were a group of people that were reacting to racism by forming a community of Black people because they were being beaten on the streets by police, right? They weren't allowed in ambulances, so you know what they did? They created their own ambulances. At that time, it was legal to carry armed weapons, and you had to go through certain qualifications in the Black Panthers to carry armed weapons, and the only people that carried armed weapons were to protect their community on the streets from police violence. The LGBT movement is more of a privileged movement in comparison to like slavery. There's really different things, so I don't even want to compare them. But I like to think of the Black Panthers model as like, they were actually a nonprofit. They fed more homeless children in 1 year than the government. So working with outside of the system, right, is our kind of motto too. If people aren't going to teach the community about LGBT civil rights leaders, we are, right? If LGBT people can't get married to get healthcare, we're going to figure out ways to either employ them at CFAC, right, and make equal opportunity for employees at CFAC, and we're going to run campaigns to make sure that, you know, as a community, we're protecting each other, because even though the government wants us to depend on it, it's not giving us enough, right? We can be denied visiting our partners in the hospital. So if that was the case, if we had a couple at CFAC and somebody was going to the hospital, we would never let them go alone, right? Although that is illegal in California, it still happens. And we don't pass legislation. We're not a group. We do have a lawyer and we're going to have some legal interns, but we don't pass legislation. We use public pressure to uphold it. So if Shelby was my partner, or even if not, me and Shelby are friends, right? We should be able to go into the hospital together. But we don't look like a man and a woman. So even here at Scripps Hospital, it's happened to me. People have been denied who are partners from going into each other's hospital room. An action we might take is having our whole organization go together. Like, what are you going to do now? We have our lawyer here. This is against the law, and we're all the queers are coming in to visit their queer because we're all family. So that's a little bit of how we work outside the system. We talk to thousands and thousands and thousands of voters and non-voters every single day. So on top of trying to win elections, we're literally trying to create safer places, right? So we go to places like Lemon Grove, which is a majority non-supportive community, but one of the easiest communities to get on our side in all of San Diego, because they're having groups out there educating them on why they should support gay rights, right? When we go to Lemon Grove, there are a lot of people that aren't registered to vote and legally can't vote. And that's okay. We're still going to spend our day there because we don't want a bunch of gay teenagers in Lemon Grove getting beat up, right? And if we can educate Lemon Grove to be a safer place, we will definitely do that. So a little bit about Occupy and why we did it. So we are always fighting and defending because we are LGBT, so we are always part of a political fight. Occupy was this awesome thing that sprung up that was kind of like, sweet, we got some help now. And like I said, we're not just like a get out the vote effort. We're LGBTQ community centered. Since the system won't take care of us, we will take care of each other. So we build our own systems and spaces to work for us. For example, trans people are the highest number of population of unemployment in all the country. At CFAC, I don't know what percentage of trans people we have working there, But next to the center, we probably have the highest percentage in all of San Diego. So we actually like seek out people to work with us that are being denied jobs just because of their gender identity and sexuality in other places. So why do we occupy? Queers have been involved in every single revolution, right? This is not like some new phenomenon. We're just getting really good at getting media attention for it now. We've been involved in every action, whether it's radical, liberal, progressive, and I hate to say it, but conservative. Just because you're gay does not mean you're a good person. The difference with Occupy San Diego is that we made it known, right? When we were told that our queer agenda was separate from the Occupy movement when we showed up, I'm gonna curse. We pretty much said, fuck you. We're not going to be in the closet just so the public doesn't get confused about the Occupy message, right? We're not going to just like shut down, go into our tents, be like, yeah, we're not going to talk about gay things anymore. It's our reality. It's all we do. It's where we live. It's how we treat each other. It's not like always just like a statement, right? So it took a minute when we got to Occupy for people to understand that. Like Holly said, 99% of people definitely includes a lot of homophobic, transphobic, racist, sexist. It's a lot of different kinds of people. So we occupy because we've been discriminated against by unfair economic structure. The LGBT community is a huge target for the unfair economic structure in the United States right now. We've been fired from our jobs for being openly gay, lesbian, transgender. We've been refused service every single day because of our complicated gender identities. We've been denied housing. We've been overqualified for jobs we'd never even be considered for. We have to fight court battles to prove that someone was calling us faggot while kicking our asses. We've lost rights to visit our partners in the hospitals because giant corporate monsters funnel millions of dollars into media smear campaigns, right? That make people identify queer with pedophilia, which is just offensive. And at this point, when I'm talking to somebody on the street and they bring up pedophilia, that's like their pushback for not supporting. I just tell them that's just offensive and I'm at the point where I can't even talk to people about that anymore. But if you do want some advice and somebody ever does bring up pedophilia and relates it to gay issues, like, well, if gays can get married, then people think they can marry children. It's really simple. It's two consenting adults, right? Or what else happens is people ask us what happened to you as children, right? The same corporations that have denied us jobs, equal benefits, and not adequate pay for our community actually profit off of our community. So Philip Morris, the gigantic cigarette corporation, for example, who here goes to gay bars? It's like, you could stand outside a gay bar and stand outside a not gay bar, and it's like 80% of the bar is smoking. This is just like not some freak coincidence, right? And I actually got to do like my theory on this in college was that Philip Morris specifically, when they saw that there was an epidemic in suicide rates in the LGBT community, they hit up LGBT teens to get addicted to cigarettes. I write about the age 17, right before they got college, right before they were getting out of their houses and were super depressed. It's actually 100% true. There is like no denying behind it. So these are the same corporations that at some points and still are denying us pay, equal benefits with our partners, won't allow us to wear the clothes that fit our gender, right? Even if they don't think it does. So we're another reason we occupy, we're a race, we are literally invisible from history lessons because people are still fearful of exposing homosexuality to their children, as if they're not going to learn about it at some point, right? So while working on the Fair Education Act, this Occupy came like as we started it, and it was this huge, like, we started this huge queer space there, and we were totally, it was like Harvey Milk's like, get out of the closets and into the streets. That was like our motto at Occupy with the queers in San Diego. We had like queer revolution on our tents. We had gay flags. We actually, the first teaching we did was on how to be a good ally to help teach occupiers. And it was like, I think the second day of the occupation. And it was huge. And so many people came and we had this huge list that was like how to be a trans ally. And people could walk by and sign their name. If they read through it, and it was like, I will be, or not trans ally, LGBT ally. And then we had different like workshops of people. We had people identifying gender-neutral bathrooms around the occupation for trans people because the only bathrooms at the Civic Center were male and female. So we literally created this like a mass amount of allies and queer people all working together to make sure the queers stayed there, because what everybody started to learn was like, we knew how to do it. Like we had just fought on Prop 8, we are now fighting on a new campaign. We have fought for equal employment opportunities. We have fought to make sure that hate crimes are recognized against our community. We are literally always in a constant battle. And when I say campaign, I don't mean like November 6th election time. I mean like, that's part of it. I mean like literal campaign. Like LGBT people, just being gay is political. And for some people that really sucks. And I don't want people to have to feel that way, right? But we are always in some kind of struggle. So it was real quick that everybody at Occupy learned, like, if the queers are happy and the queers feel safe, they will help this movement because they know exactly what to do. And that's what happened. We started training occupiers how to go door to door. We actually used the Canvas for a Cause model, how to talk to non-supporters of the Occupy movement. We started writing out for other occupations across the country how to create a queer safe space. And from that, it was like, wait a second, there's a lot of sexism here too. And this evolved because queers were talking about homophobia and transphobia, right? And oh wait, there's always men on the microphones, or like, man, when's the last time you saw a woman running one of the groups? That wasn't like Holly stepping up every single day and saying, you know? Then the radical feminists started out of the Occupy movement. And these aren't separate agendas, and it's a really big fight sometimes to help people, to force people to see that, and it's not anybody's job. But when we developed those allies and people were doing it for us, it became a lot easier. And we're still heavily involved in Occupy. We just picked up another campaign that I'm just going to plug really quick. So we are still working on the Fair Education Act. You guys will see us all over San Diego, LA. We're hoping to continue expanding. I actually found out that we have San Diego's most active gay rights field program in all the county. Yeah, it's a really awesome title to have. That doesn't mean like we're the biggest gay rights group. That's probably like the center or something. But that means we're the most in the field. We're the most talking to people. And a lot of people initially think like, oh, so you're protesting. Yes, we protest. That's part of what we do. Also, we helped legalize gay marriage in New York. We stood on the streets with a bunch of iPhones and had people's senators on speed dial, and in 3 days got over 1,000 phone calls to one senator who came out in a newspaper article saying it was the most public and he voted against gay marriage years before, and he voted in support saying, on the day that we were doing, one of the 3 days we were doing that, he said, I've never felt so much public pressure on this issue that I have today, and he changed his mind. So our real tactic is to like mobilize people and get you guys to help us do bigger things. Because if I call a senator, that's cool, right? But if we all call a senator back to back, oh shit, like there's a group of people somewhere really caring about this. And if it happens all day, there's a group of people everywhere, and they're not just a group of people. It's not just some organization. This is just mass amounts of people that care about this issue, and our whole job is to train people on how to mobilize each other so we are actually making the political decisions. Not someone just like signing it off because that's what they thought was right, or that's who like sponsored them and gave them money to do that. It's like the people will like uprise, right? Like gay marriage in New York. If you put something like this on the ballot and enough people support it, and we knew enough people supported it, we had to make sure the senators knew that. And if they made the wrong decision, they were screwed. They wouldn't be voted in next time, so they would lose a little. And these are Republicans that were being guaranteed, what was it?
$1 million from the National Organization for Marriage.
If they were the person who actually changed their mind and moved on to the side of equality, was being pledged $1 million in their next election from the National Organization for Marriage. So there was so much public pressure that they actually turned down $1 million for their campaign. Yay! Thank you. So it's things like that, and we're now working on a cannabis reform campaign. We've always been heavily involved in cannabis reform, and I'll keep this quick. The reason the gay right is so important for the LGBT community to be involved in everything, something like cannabis rights, actually the rise of cannabis becoming legal in California, it has actually been legal since 1996, imagine that, came from San Francisco. And that's pretty much how medical cannabis blew up in California. So we see it as our job when we see these government officials cracking down on something our community fought so hard to have access to. Like in San Diego, there's 17 San Diego municipalities, right? and every single one has an extremely unfair ban and restriction on medical cannabis. What this means is that literally people with multiple sclerosis, cancer, HIV/AIDS are being criminalized for using medicine prescribed by their doctor. That's the point that it's at in San Diego. So there are 70,000 medical cannabis patients in San Diego alone. There used to be about 200 dispensaries. We are less than a dozen now. Last week, a couple more shut down, so we might be even less than 8 or 9. So we're starting with Imperial Beach. We are gathering signatures on a ballot initiative. Does anyone know Americans for Safe Access? Yay! They are pretty much like the largest medical cannabis organization in the country. They're huge. They have tons of lawyers. They fight for patients' rights. They get patients out of really bad situations that like can't afford lawyers. And they're amazing. They helped pass a ballot initiative starting with Imperial Beach. If we gather 2,000 to 3,000 signatures, we're saying 3 so that when the government disqualifies a bunch of ours because they don't want us to open more dispensaries, that there will be, we have to do this by June 1st, so we literally have people doing it right now in Imperial Beach. The last dispensary in Imperial Beach got shut down last week. So we collect enough signatures by June 1st, which is 2,000 to 3,000. There will be a ballot initiative just for Imperial Beach voters for November to vote for safe access. It is 100% clear when you're standing in the streets of Imperial Beach that this is what the people want. So again, it's our job to make it happen. If anybody is interested in being a volunteer on that campaign, we definitely need help and we'll have volunteer sign-up sheets. It is like super urgent and pressing. And the Fair Education Act, we're not sure if it's going to qualify yet. If it doesn't, we're going to really up our volunteer recruitment in 2014. But if anybody wants to learn more or become part of our medical cannabis campaign in Imperial Beach, we would love your help. And now I'm going to pass it off to Nemo. But I'm going to read your introduction.
Yay, Jersey!
There's no like clock anywhere, so I'm just like, all right.
You guys are doing great.
Cool. So Nemo. Nemo's first engagement with international organizing was organizing for systematic change. Began as a movement liaison on the coordinating committee for the United Students for Fair Trade. When he learned to understand global oppression and how to mobilize strategically for equality within the community, for things like fair trade and student organizing. I can't read your handwriting there. But Nemo is now an organizer with Canvas for a Cause. He has been involved in grassroots activism for 7 years, beginning with the Interfaith Coalition of the Texas Christian University. When he graduated in 2009 with a BA in Cultural Anthropology and Spanish and Latin American Studies minor. He is now a full-time organizer at Canvas for a Cause, working for queer rights, and he is also traveling all over the country with the Occupy movement. He lives every day in the identity of a transgender, radical, feminist, anarchist poet.
That's me. First of all, thanks everybody for coming, because we all need to learn, and that's why we go to school. And thank you for having us here to talk about it. So I just kind of wanted to start off by giving you a little bit of my background. Like I said, I've been involved in grassroots organizing for 7 years. Incidentally, began at Texas Christian University. I was raised in a very conservative environment, and I was expected to continue that throughout my life. But when I got involved with the Interfaith Coalition, it was at the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, which incidentally was where all the social justice groups met. And so I just started joining every single group to the point that they just made an internship for me because I was there all the time. And I became the movement liaison with that as well. And that's what I like to do with groups. I like to know what different people are doing and see how we can work together. I think that activism is based on understanding what your environment is and what your resources are. So activism should always be grassroots because every environment is different. I consider the system, as we call it, a part of the environment. So that's more something that we have to deal with than something we benefit by in my personal experience. I'm saying that specifically as a transgender person who has been, I learned the word systemic at Fair Trade. I've been systemically denied access to equality in this country, where it's not just being fired for getting a job, or it's not just not having an equal opportunity with the interview, going to a job, it's, I'm not even gonna bother. So, but that actually worked out really well for me because I got to become an activist. And that's the best thing any of us can do with our lives. So from the Interfaith Coalition and United Students for Fair Trade, I was organizing nationally and internationally with both of those. But I also incidentally joined the GSA, which I was straight at the time. And, and it was through just, we have mentioned safe spaces a lot, and I really can't emphasize enough what it means to have a safe space, because it was literally the first time I had been in a space where I could just have my identity. And I could just go there and be there, and the people didn't ask me if I was gay or not. I was just like, I support gay rights, and that's all we need to know here. And so I began in activism and rallies in that kind of way with the Day of Silence and like coming out day. But my real radical activism was just in the classroom. Did I mention Texas Christian University? So I went ahead and took the saboteur approach and joined classes like Christian ethics. And exemplified a theological approach to marriage equality, and just was always that voice in the classroom that most of the people didn't want to hear. And I take pride in that. And so it was also during the time when I was in college that I began to understand I had a queer identity, but I still didn't know what that had meant to me. Growing up, I never knew anybody that was out, and the only thing I heard about gay people was that they wanted to give you AIDS. So that was literally what my family told me my entire life. So it was a really difficult process for me to identify with anything gay. And I actually had begun using male pronouns like 4 years before I ever said I'm transgender. So I kind of snuck into my gender identity just like I snuck into activism. And now that I work at Canvas for a Cause, it's just being surrounded by these incredible activists every day, and like actually interacting with other transgender people, which I don't know if y'all ever thought about that. Imagine going through days or weeks or months of your life at a time without seeing a single other person with the same identity as you, and that makes you think you can't do the things that you can do. So now I'm in a space where every day I'm affirmed for my identity. And because of creating that safe space, the reason we've emphasized that is now for the first time in my life, almost 25 now, and for the first time in my life, I can walk into a place, assess the environment, assess the resources, and determine how I can be most useful in achieving our mutual goals. Now, in any other situation in my life, even today as it stands, when I'm not with these people, that's not the case. Any other scenario in my life is assess the environment, oh shit, I'm not supposed to be here. So it's really wonderful to have that kind of emphasis on it in any sort of activist movement, because a lot of people do have a lot to offer, and maybe we do need a little more help being told that we can do it, because the first 25 years we were told we can't. And so when I started getting involved with Occupy, that was after I had started at Canvas for a Cause as an organizer there. And, you know, it was through everything that I learned there that I developed the ability to stare down a cop who was physically threatening me and not worry about it. And that was a lot of what we dealt with. You know, Occupy is a political movement, and a lot of what we see is the police brutality. But that's another thing that really stays with you when you think, do we want to work in the system? And what you see is a line of officers with their hands strategically placed on their guns and their other hand holding a club. Then you wonder, is this the system that, did I vote for that? I can't remember. And as we're exposed to these authoritarian systems in these more and more physical, direct ways, these people in this room, we locked arms together, and like, we were choked, we were kicked, we were maced, and we were on the last tent. We were keeping that last tent down at Occupy, because this means something. And what they're trying to take from us is the community that we have. And so the same thing that makes Occupy powerful, having that space, an environment with resources where people can join together and share ideas, that's also what you have on campuses, right? And that's one of the things I really loved about student activism, is you are actually organized already, right? That's good news. You're already here. So now you have the ability to just come together, see what you need to do, see what you're passionate about, and just take care of it. And again, that's what made CFAC, Canvas for a Cause, work so well within Occupy, and is what made us have such a brilliant, wonderful queer space there, is because all these people came in like, we're pissed off, and now we're standing here, rawr. And then Canvas for a Cause came in and like, we're pissed off too. Have you heard about canvassing? And so we already are mobilizing, and queer people are the perfect people to even head this movement, I would say, because, I mean, seriously, to think about the odds that each of us as a queer person has to overcome, we are the people most likely to be bullied in school. We are the adults who survived all those staggering odds mounted against us, the highest rates of truancy, of suicide, of homelessness, disproportionate exploitation and sex trafficking. That's the story of a lot of queer people. And so we already had all the reasons we needed to get together and start saying something about it. And it's nice now that other people are saying, like, we have this cause too. And there's no single cause that doesn't involve queer people. No progressive cause doesn't involve queer people, because we are the laborers, we are the women, and we are everybody, and we're everywhere. And now that we have this strategy to add to the anger, now that we have the largest volunteer bank for a gay rights organization in all of San Diego, we have all these people from Occupy coming to our volunteer events all the time, and all of our CFACers go volunteer down at Occupy. So we can really just do whatever we want, is how I feel. I think that we have a lot to look forward to with the way everything is changing, and I think that it's a frightening time in history because our systems are catching up to us in a more rapid way than we've been used to. The trash that's piling up is just in our backyard now. It's not out in the middle of the ocean. And so I think that Occupy is so important in working outside of the system because, like I said, the system is just part of the environment. It's not something I ever existed in at all. And the system tells you what space is available, and then they make you apply for it. Outside of a system, a collective group can perceive a need and maybe feel angry and say, why do we feel this way? And then they realize they all have that same feeling in common. And they can then take that direct action. And they now you all know about Canvas for a Cause, so you can just come ask us what to do. And with that common interest and passion and empathy, it's really possible to organize for anything. And the best organizing I've seen at Occupy is just that people get an idea and they do it. So one of the things I did in all the different Occupies is just go to GAs. And at every single GA, I'm sure if y'all have gone to GAs, you've seen it too. It's always like, but how do we make the system work? How do we make the system work? But all the most effective actions that were taken were usually debated at GA later after they had already happened. Because it's the people who get together, see that something needs to be done, and do it. And that's what makes the change. And if we try to channel ourselves down into these certain patterns of behavior, then we're inhibiting our own ability, and we're inhibiting the things that we know we can do. And the thing about Occupy too is that it is kind of a blank slate for people. It is all of these different causes coming together, and it is a place where we can all learn about everybody. And who doesn't want to do that, right? That's why we're here right now, right? It's just fun to learn about people. And we have all of these things in common and all these things that we can celebrate. And we actually have this physical space where we can do it. And that's why it's so important to continue to congregate like that. And I also wanted to mention that with the traveling and Occupy, the way that I see my role within that is as a messenger. And just doing things like this. People want to listen, people want to talk, right? So we can let everybody know what's going on. And I could see in every city a different element of how many queer people were there, or what kind of role they had. And actually get to experience traveling and feeling safe for the first time. Like I said, Canvas for a Cause was the first space that I felt safe, but it's really scary to travel when you're transgender. It's really scary. And so to know that each city I went to, I'm just gonna roll up into GA and start talking to people, and I'm gonna have a place to stay tonight, and I'm gonna be safe there. So this is a beautiful movement on all levels. We want these political changes, but the most important thing, the most important difference that any of us ever makes in our life is what we do to ourselves and the way that we choose to treat the people around us. So thank you for listening. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great. So I want to say thank you for all four of you for your amazing experiences and stories, your activism, your courage to to put yourselves in the forefront of public action when it's literally dangerous to your well-being, and for providing such an inspirational role model for those of us who are here today, and for those of us who will undoubtedly hear the rebroadcast of this on educational television. There is another workshop that's supposed to start around 2 o'clock, but we do want to have questions and answers. So I'll just say, people who are waiting, just come on in, come join us, and let's open up the floor for a little while. Monica, who's in charge of the workshop?
John coming in right now.
John is? Okay. So I think we have time for just a few questions before John comes in and takes over. So who has a question for our panel? Well, actually, let's just start with, why don't you present your petition there?
Sweet. So we did bring something so you can all help us take action, like we were talking, power in numbers. I'm just going to read this letter really quick. And as Nemo was saying, here in San Diego, we were definitely a group of people that were a little screwed by the system when we were occupying, getting beat up and maced in the face and hospitalized and all that good stuff. And now we are reaching out to protect UC Davis students. I'm just going to read this letter, and we would love everybody who supports this, if we could get your information. You pretty much sign the letter, put your name, your zip code, you print your name, your zip code, and city, sign it, and you can put any comments. Last time we did this, we did it for a group of the Equality 9. I won't get into who they are, but they were arrested for peacefully protesting for marriage licenses. In 1 month, we got over 1,000 letters, and we're giving them to the city clerk on the end of this month. So this is a really, really powerful way to move legislation and move government officials. I know it just seems like one person, but we've had the largest letter writing campaign in the history of San Diego, one time with 3,000 letters on Prop 19. So what it says is, Chancellor Linda Katehi, last year, political uprisings shook our globe. Domestically, the major uprising started in Wisconsin and then took root in New York City with Occupy Wall Street. After spreading to more than 100,000 communities in the U.S., the movement took root in a traditional arena of activism, the college campus. Just as the students' protests at Kent State changed the public sentiment during the Vietnam War, the student protests at UC Berkeley and UC Davis shook the country and changed minds about Occupy and the state of our country and our world. The thousands of calls for your resignation are now once again being ignored as your campus administration retroactively pushes for the punishment of 12 students and professors for their peaceful protest. Protesters shut down a U.S. bank on the UC Davis campus. In response to the fifth largest commercial bank's profit-driven attack on students through student debt and continuous tuition increases, and successfully voided their contract with their university. However, now, months later, the protesters are being prosecuted for exercising freedom of speech. They're being charged with 11 misdemeanors and fines up to, does that say $1 million each? This will not go unnoticed. Just as the image of our future generations being violated by the police force will not leave our collective mindset, neither will the response from the university and our so-called justice system. I'm calling on you, Chancellor Katehi, to drop the charges and stop persecuting students that fight for fair and equal access to quality public education. These students could be subject to 11 years in jail.